Readers read for enjoyment. It's their end of day or early day wind down. It's on the beach, it's on a plane. They're not reading out of urgency. They're not reading out of chaos energy. They're reading to calm down. And typically they do pour something to do it, which is, where our ideas came from. But the reading journey is a wellness journey in a way. People read because they have the luxury of time to read, or they carve out the luxury of time to read. And I think that's something really important authors need to remember when they go to market themselves. It's, you don't need to feel urgency to market because your readers don't feel urgency to read. It should all come from that same place of, a book is unfortunately not a need, it is a want. So how do we make them want your book next?
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 483 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Today's episode, I have an interview with Jessica Sorentino, who's an author brand strategist with more than a decade of experience helping writers and thought leaders connect with their audiences in meaningful, lasting ways. She's worked with top publishing houses, including Simon & Schuster and Macmillan publishers, where she developed deep expertise in positioning authors for commercial success and authentic reader engagement. And it is a fantastic conversation, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsors. This episode is sponsored by my affiliate relationship with Manuscript Report. Now, in this episode, you're going to hear Jessica recommend an incredible strategy to use when you're marketing your books. She mentions how she works with clients to help pull out themes from a book that can help build out a conversation with the right readers. Fantastic advice among so many other great bits of advice she gives. Now, with Manuscript Report, it's a fantastic tool that can help you with pulling out elements right from your manuscript that include themes, tropes, comparable authors and titles, and even a breakdown of the demographics of the ideal readers for a book like yours. Now, no tool, no consultant, no strategy is ever going to work in isolation, but Manuscript Report can help you narrow down some of the elements that are drawn very specifically from your manuscript to assist with ideas, concepts, and strategies that you can use to optimize your own marketing approach, whether you're doing it yourself or you're working with an author branding specialist like Jessica. And if you want to take advantage of Manuscript Report and save 10% off on these tools, use my affiliate code MARK10, MARK10, to get 10% off at manuscriptreport.com. Plenty of comments coming in. I'm going to try and get caught up on a few of them. I'm not going to get to all of them, but I'm just going to do a bit of a highlight and not even the full comments because they're so long. Thank you guys so much for these. So over on episode 481, Becoming a Creative Luminary with Laura Hawley, Don King said, I'm one of those people who usually listen on a podcatcher, who intend to come comment at some point, but then don't get around to it. In fact, I have mixed feelings about making this comment since I really should be working on my own next book, as well as editing a client's book. But I have one more typewriter story, doggone it. I'm going to gloss over this. Don went on to share a really awesome story about a typewriter experience, and it ends with the following line. I vowed at that point to never be held hostage by a machine again. Like, Don, I see why comments are such a challenge, because you're such a great storyteller and you go on and share this really incredible story. I wish I had time to read it, but hey, you guys can go check it out over at starkreflections.ca for episode 481. Thank you for that, Don. And on that same episode, Edward Downward said how much he enjoyed the fascinating talk about how Laura will change her setup to get just the right sound for a particular scene. Edward goes on to say, it never really occurred to me that something as simple as going from sitting to standing can change your vocal range, or that turning yourself within a space can have the same effect. There are subtle but brilliant actions to give us the effect we hear when listening to audio productions. Thank you so much for that comment. Over on episode 482, I also received several comments both about Paul's book and the topic, outlining for novelists who don't outline, and the reaction to my personal update talking about the death of our dog, Indy. A Kev partner said, I'm so sorry to hear about Indy, Mark. I had to go through something similar last year with my 17-year-old terrier, Cross Dizzy. I pushed her around in a dog pram for the last several years, and she'd led a happy life. But, like you, we knew when it was time. It was terribly, terribly tough, and a different kind of grief. Now, Kev went on in that comment to share a pretty awesome story about a fateful encounter that led to a beautiful new connection, which I love. He then shared, I bought an ebook copy of Paul's book, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool pantser, and hate outlining as if I know my story in advance. I don't want to write. As if I know the story in advance, I don't want to write it, but I'm always looking for ways to improve my process. Thank you for that, Kev. It was funny. We lost Maya, a smaller dog that we had a few years ago, 3 years ago now. And yeah, for the last couple months of Maya's life, because her legs were just not as strong, I would carry her up and down the stairs. I built a ramp for her in the winter, a snow ramp, so she could go out and go to the washroom more easily than trying to manage the stairs. I lifted her in and out of the bed. So I remember those moments of, what it was like to try to do what you could for a dog. And I even joked with Liz, like, hey, if Indy's back legs get really, really bad, we'll plop his bum in a little, because Liz builds things all the time. We'll bum in a little thing where he can just use his front legs and wheels. But sadly, it was his spleen that eventually got to him. But thank you for that. And cool. So cool that you got Paul's book. Martin Shoemaker also shared a really long story, so I'm only going to read parts of it here. The comment starts off with, I decided to learn to dictate. It was a difficult process, but my commute to work was 1 hour each way. It gave me a way to write when I couldn't write, and I learned. Over the course of 9 weeks and entirely out of order, I pantsed a mystery. I stitched it together and sent it off to Analog magazine. They bought it. Gardner reprinted it in the year's best science fiction. I think it worked. Later in the comment, he says, it seemed to work. The book has nearly 7,000 Amazon reviews, average 4.4. It was the #1 science fiction ebook on Amazon for a month. Now, the sequel had a very deliberate outline. I threw it out 10% of the way in, and I pantsed the rest in what Publishers Weekly called an intricately plotted mystery. Thank you for that story, Martin. I love how, and I think I saw somewhere else you left the comment about that intricately plotted mystery that kind of made you laugh because it was completely pantsed as well. So thanks for that affirmation that not just Paul, but you're a mystery writer who enjoys the pantsing aspect. Darren Lippman said, it was very exciting listening to you both and thinking, hey, I know those people. I was at Paul's recent book launch for A Fatal Ingredient. Darren, I'm jealous. And I might need to pick up his new book as well. I think you should, Darren. Darren goes on to say, I'm also a discovery writer at heart, but I've learned there's a lot of useful skills I can learn from planners too. Thank you both for a great listen. And thank you, Darren. When I see that, I can say, hey, I know Darren. Anyways, thanks, guys, for the comments. Now, I'm going to get to more comments from that episode, as there are many more next week. And just a reminder of the offer for those who comment over at starkreflections.ca for episode 482. There's a chance to win a print copy of Paul's first book for authors, From Zero to Four Figures. And that's coming up, I think, as I mentioned, I'll probably be doing that draw on the 22nd of July, I believe. So, get those comments so you have a chance to win. There will be 3 copies going to people who comment. And obviously, and all of my patrons will get a chance to win an additional copy. So that 4th copy is going to go to patrons. Now, if a patron happens to comment on the episode, then that doubles your chances of getting a chance for me to send that book. And I will be sending that book. I will find out when I contact you if there's a local bookstore you love. I will special order it through that local bookstore so I can support that local bookstore. I may end up using Bookshop, because that supports indie bookstores, or potentially Amazon if there's no other option that's close to you to get that book to you. I can also even potentially get a signed copy ordered directly from Paul, but I love sharing the love around a little bit because I know that, Paul's shipping is going to cost additional funds, for him to do that, and him doing all that extra work takes away from what he should be doing, what we should all be doing more of, which is writing. But that's it for the comments. I'm going to play a bumper and get to a personal update. And then right after the personal update, we will get into the interview with Jessica, talking about author branding. Well, for personal update, I'm still, it's just a little over a week since Indy passed over the Rainbow Bridge. I admittedly have spent several mornings. One of the first things I do is would weep and bawl uncontrollably by myself while Liz was still upstairs sleeping. Because again, there's this thing that just keeps happening every morning when I get up, and I'm used to him being at the foot of the bed, and it just that the cats are very happy to get fed, and I feed them and I talk to them, just and then there's no Indy to talk to and then no Indy to scold if he's in the backyard eating yesterday's poop that I hadn't cleaned up. All the things that used to annoy me about him, I miss so much. Even at the barbecue at night, it's kind of like, where's my little helper? When I drop food on, like, getting annoying me because he's underfoot all the time. But then when I dropped some meat or pieces or whatever on the ground, or I finish off, I'm like, hey Indy, do you think this chicken is ready? Do you think this meat is ready? What do you think? And I take it off. I make sure it's cooked, of course, and then give him a piece of it. So I kind of miss having all those little things. It's so funny that they get missed. I did my best to also, I posted on Monday, as I've been trying to post. So every Friday the podcast comes out, and every Monday I've been trying to post reflections, stark reflections for writers on my Substack. And I tried to draw parallels between the grief I was going through, how I fell in love with Indy, even though I never wanted a dog, how he grew on me in such a beautiful way, but also the lessons I learned as a writer from Indy. And one of those lessons, of course, I want to share that quickly with you here, is when we used to play fetch in the water with him, I would like whip the stick out as far as I can go, try to tire him out because he's just a very animated, energetic dog, and he would swim, like, he'd just go crazy for it, and you get to a point of exhaustion where Liz is like, okay, stop throwing the stick so far, he's gonna just drop, he's gonna sink because he's gonna run out of energy. So we would do that. And then as he got older, I didn't want to throw the stick at all because we were worried about him. So when he had no sticks, he would use his leash that was floating around, still attached to him, so we could easily, reel him in if another dog showed up. And it was so funny that when there were no sticks, he made his own sticks. He made his own fun. He made up a new game so he could keep doing what he wanted. And that's a reminder to us authors in the industry that continually takes away our sticks or changes our sticks. And we get used to sticks being a certain way and they're a different way, or there's no more sticks. So what are the things that we can do to make our own sticks, to make our own games, to sort of satisfy those elements of what it is that we do? It was just something I kept thinking about, of how he just adapted and moved on. And I think even about the ways that I've adapted my writing in different styles. I talked in previous weeks about rediscovering my love for typing. And part of my motivation for wanting to go back and play on a typewriter and do more writing on a typewriter is not just nostalgia for the beginning of my writing when I actually used to type my stories up, but it was a reminder to myself that it doesn't matter. Well, my handwriting I can never read, but it doesn't matter how I write on a laptop, on a whatever desktop, online, typing, writing, whatever. It's the writing itself. So it's the fetching that Indy does that he loved. That was his passion. It's the storytelling. It's the writing that I so love. So anyways, a story of sticks and a story of fetching. And again, that's what we do as writers, right? We're fetching elements. We're bringing them all together and then we're putting them out in a story that we tell in our way. So anyways, I'll include a link to that in the show notes. It's been tough. I've been in a weird place where I'm kind of not depressed, and it's weird how the funk is. Now, I also found out about a friend of mine who passed away, and I'd learned that she was very ill, and I promised her husband that I would not share this publicly, but he just recently shared publicly, and she did pass away a few days ago, and he had actually shared that there's going to be a celebration of life for her in September, and that hit me as it did, because she was a really awesome person. I think I mean I've only seen them in person once a couple years ago, and then previously it was a few years back, so I never really saw them in person a lot in the last 20 years, but we had worked together, and she was a really amazing person who brought a lot of wonderful things to my life, including teaching me how to be a bookstore manager as well. She was a great boss. She was a great book nerd that I loved and still love, and I'm looking forward to celebrating Catherine's life. But that hit me the way it would normally hit me when you find out that someone was no longer with us, and you'll never have the chance to chat with them again, to see their smile, to hear their voice. And it was so funny, and in combination with this loss of Indy, which is really raw and it startled me actually, how much it impacted me, hearing about Catherine hit even harder. And I have been trying to get out of this funk. And it's just weird how pets, those furry family members can be such a connection we don't expect. I've gotten the edits back on the first half of A Book in Hand. I've been going through that and been going through it really, really slowly, because I'm also in a position where Liz has done this amazing job of rebuilding my office for me, but I'm still kind of floating around and I don't quite have all the things back the way I would normally do. So a lot of even the writing itself is not just go sit down and get my writing done. It's futzing with the logistics. So I'm in that weird in between place as well. So I'm trying really hard to get that done, because I really need to get A Book in Hand done, because I have, oh my god, this book. I have 4 other things that I need to do for people that I'm publishing under my imprint, and I'm behind on, and I feel terrible about it, but it's like this extra work I've taken on, and I need to get back to, actually no, there's 5 of them, maybe even 6 now. It's just distracting in a way, but I need to get to a point where I can get some of this stuff done, and I honestly feel like I'm spinning a bunch of plates and everything's coming crashing down around me. Part of that could be part of the grief that I'm dealing with, but because I have another novel to finish, and I know I'm going to get the next round of edits back on my Ghost Stories of the Great Lakes, and I've already started some of the promotional activities for that book coming out in October. That's a traditionally published book. So all that is to say, in terms of a personal update, my goodness, I'm a mess, and it's so clearly obvious that I am not doing a good job keeping things on track, but I'm struggling. I'm doing my best, and I know I'll get through this eventually. But that's it for my chaotic personal update. Why don't we roll the bumper? And why don't you and I go ahead and listen to this fantastic conversation with Jessica And at the end of the interview, I'll be back with some reflections on some of the awesome things that Jessica talks about. Hey, Jessica, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hi, Mark. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to chat with you. So, I guess before we get started, we're going to be talking a lot about author branding. Let's talk specifically about Jessica and your branding as an author branding insider and expert.
Oh man, that's a good way to start. I always like to say that it's like the shoemaker's shoes analogy, where the shoemaker's children doesn't have shoes.
Yes.
As a branding specialist, my brand comes last. But, it's interesting because what I define brand as is what people remember you for. Oftentimes, authors feel very overwhelmed by, I need to have a brand, or I don't know what my brand is. My brand is my book. I counter with, you do have a brand. Anybody in your personal life who calls you or texts you or sends you something that says, this made me think of you, that characteristic that connected you is part of your brand. So, along those lines, the things that would be in my personal brand would be anything book related, branding related, Martha Stewart-esque, like a striving to be like a Martha Stewart type person,
Yeah.
minus jail, of course. So, yes, I love helping authors discover what those hidden lines are in their own story, essentially.
Oh, awesome. So I guess that is always a challenge because we can't often see ourselves the way others see us, and so
Totally.
we're often blind to the brand that we already have or already exude.
Hmm.
Are there strategies or tips that you help authors with to determine what their existing brand may be? Because they probably already have one, right?
Absolutely. And yes, it's exactly what I do in all of my workshops, in even with my like private clients, we do this on a regular basis because sometimes, like you're saying, not only is it hard to uncover, but it's also hard to keep in mind, or
Yeah.
as human beings, we evolve and our interests change with the seasons or, you know, everything that just happened with New York sporting events, like, what you might be trying to find a way to connect to it. So it's important to do an exercise like I'll just talk through really quickly, frequently, and it's something you can do straight from the comfort of your own home. I encourage my authors to, I do it myself also, to pretend to like visualize you just had a coffee date or a lunch date or, your meeting of choice with a dream reader or follower. And now you come home and you do a journal entry about what you spoke about. So what did you bond over? Like, what was your common ground? Because I'm sure I'm quoted saying this before, but I guarantee you didn't walk into this coffee meeting holding up your book saying, buy my book, because that is what a lot of our author brands feel like when you look at them in the state that they're in currently. So we have to strip back the sales marketing, find the common ground. And once you have the common ground between you, your book, and your reader, the conversation will flow so much more naturally because that's what actually moves books off the internet and into people's hands.
I love that. So you do consulting with authors. You've consulted
Mhm.
for some major, big six
Yes.
publisher or authors with those publishers. How does that work? Is it the author or is it the publisher or is it a combination?
So I started my career in Simon and Schuster like full time as an employee and
Okay.
everything else. This was before the internet was really a career in its own right.
Right.
And I also had a lifestyle blog at the time, like every millennial woman did in their 20s. And it was really fun. And I pride myself on being an early adapter to the way things work and the way things change. I stay curious, I stay flexible. And back when I was working at Simon and Schuster, I also could talk to a wall and have a great conversation. So I would talk to every author that came through the door, have great conversations, learn a lot about what they were struggling with, and just sort of, a lot of them were also trying to be on the forefront of change and in
Right.
visibility. So many books come out every single week. How do you make sure yours is the one that comes, in readers' bags. And at the end of the day, we have to remember too, the publishers can't ongoingly promote every single book they publish, right? Like
Right.
there's just no possibility. They publish books every single Tuesday all throughout the year. So it's important for the authors to feel like they have some control and some of a hand in helping their books maintain relevancy.
Right.
And that's just not something that's really taught in-house because there's not really bandwidth to teach that in-house. But my career at Simon and Schuster ended when I decided to take a leap and go off on my own and start to help
Wow. Okay.
individuals with their social media. At the time it started with social media and I didn't really, the word brand wasn't being thrown around as much as it is these days. But I never just wanted to be glued to the internet because I value human connection so much.
Right.
But it was great that I had those skills because of COVID. It was
Yeah.
COVID was great for me professionally because I helped independent bookstores go digital. I helped certain imprints sort of gain their footing in a more digital standpoint. And then as far as Macmillan went, I was friend of a friend connected to somebody in Macmillan who was being backed to take a risk on building Macmillan's first direct-to-consumer brand. So
Yeah.
for those listening who may not know, publishers do not sell directly to readers. Publishers sell to booksellers who sell to readers. It's a wholesale business, a B2B, business to business.
Yes.
And Macmillan was going to go and do business to reader, so direct to consumer. And so I was hired to build that brand from the ground up.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
fantastic. It was so much fun. And I spent some time with them doing that and working with authors privately on my own.
Wow. I love the fact that you've worked, obviously worked with publishers, authors, but also independent booksellers, like helping
So
them
fun.
with that. But a
Yeah.
little passion of mine, of course, independent book.
Hmm.
Were they local booksellers that you
Yes.
had? So you got to go in and meet them in person?
Yes, and it was so fun because the people who own bookstores, as you know, are just like the most passionate people for books and they want to be asked what to read next or they want to indulge in a conversation with a patron. And when the stores kind of shut down for COVID and everything, it was really difficult for them to find that passion in the business. It's like the ones I worked with, at least, they weren't in it for the business side of it. They were in it for the love of the books and the stories.
Yes.
And having that piece of the business cut off during COVID was really difficult for them. So
Yeah.
giving them the platform and teaching them the ways to still find their readers and still connect with their readers it was a really special thing to be able to do.
Oh, that is so amazing. It's funny you talk about the way publishers are in traditional publishing, they release
Hmm.
books every Tuesday for that's a New York Times bestseller list sort of
Yep.
maximization. But and indie authors is something that they're not aware of because that they've never been in that side of the game.
Right.
But one of the things I recognize is a publisher may have publicists or a publicist, depending on the size of the publishing house. And that publicist has a slate of authors under their care.
Hmm.
And they usually only have the bandwidth for the launch or the
Hmm.
pre-launch, like the few months up to the launch and then the launch, and then they're on to the next thing because they have so much. It's a hamster
Hmm.
wheel constantly
Oh my
moving.
gosh, for
Is
sure.
it that's probably one of the reasons why an author may want to consider outside support in addition to the
Yes.
publicists they have, right?
Yeah, so it's actually, we have this on my website too, if anyone is interested in reading it. But that's a big question I get asked is what you're like, authors are like, well, what you're doing with me, shouldn't my publicist be doing that? And the answer is, well, I'm not a publicist. So that's number one.
Okay.
But number two, what I help authors do when you have a personal brand, an author brand, it's interchangeable, call it what you want. When you have a brand and recognition and points of view that you can speak to consistently, clearly, and regularly that tie back to your book and are interesting to your reader, the publicist has more to work with if the publicist knows that there are people willing to listen to you or hear you or be present in your journey, they have more opportunities to pitch you for. And I mean this with love and respect, but authors with zero presence or zero readership, visible readership, are going to have a harder time landing publicity than authors who already have readers at the ready.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what the brand does, is the brand informs the platform and the platform informs the publicity.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, in again, I'm going to go back to traditional publishing. It's usually all about the launch.
Mhm.
It's all about the front list,
Yep.
and then it's gone. I know, for example, many of my traditionally published titles, I'm the work doing years after the book
Yes.
has been published. I'm the one doing all the groundwork and stuff like that. And I sometimes remember to let the publisher know what I'm up to, but that's sort of secondary because they've moved on to so many other things, right? Their backlist is a different beast unless something special happens. For an author who's considering, looking at their brand and stuff like that, is it too late? A book came out, or books have been out for whatever. How does an author address brand when it's not like this hot new title that they're just about to publish in 3 months or 6 months or whatever, or just come out? How do you address branding for those existing those existing elements?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, I have so many opinions about new releases and the way that they enter the world. But I think, it is true. And I don't have this year's statistic, but last year's statistic was that 80% of traditional book sale revenue came from the backlist. So
Wow,
that's that
that's
should be a
that's huge.
relief. That yes, that should be a relief to all authors who feel sort of dumped by their publisher after their launch period. Like you were just saying, you do a majority of the work and sometimes update them. I've heard it be described as it feels like the relationship ended or like a breakup. And, it's because now they have to focus that launch period on somebody else. But when you zoom out from the big picture, those launch windows are doing great work for visibility and for, buzz, but they're not making up the majority of the sales. What makes up the majority of the sales is readers. And I may have already said it because I say it a zillion times. I don't even hear myself anymore, but passionate readers sell books. And the more time your book is on a bookshelf, the more opportunity you have for passionate readers to pick it up, to love it, or to be recommended by somebody who liked a similar title. So, all of that is to say, it doesn't matter where you are in your writing journey, whether your book is out already or it's still an idea, it's never the wrong time to think about building your brand. The one thing I do recommend though is if you are going to start on a branding journey, don't do it while you're in the throes of your manuscript because it is a good amount of work to get started. And one ball will drop and you won't feel like prioritizing it, and then it'll be a lot harder to get off of the ground. But as long as your manuscript is in a place where you can sort of split your time in your writing career between the two, then there is no wrong time to start your branding. I actually like working with authors whose books are already in the world because it gives us content to work with. There's not the expectation of this huge splash or this quick window where if we don't do everything right now, it's considered a failure or
Right.
a mental flop or anything like that. This book exists. We can pull passages from it. We can be creative with art. We can be creative with questions and finding where the readers are and host events and everything else because the book is already in the space where the readers had an opportunity to build a relationship with it.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. So in book selling, there's the comp authors and the comp titles.
Mhm.
How much of comp authorship is part of that author branding?
I think it's a huge part of it because, well, first of all, I think that from all the industries of people that I know that work in publishing, authors are some of the most collaborative people I've ever met. And I think that that's because writing is a solo opportunity and a solo career that I've just noticed there is such goodwill in the world of authorship. Like, there's always expecta or exceptions, of course, but for the most part, there's just so much goodwill, and authors are willing to share other authors' work and collaborate whenever possible. I think it's a really hard world out there to find your voice and your visibility, and there's definitely a camaraderie in lifting each other up. So what I always recommend, I have an author that I work with who works on historical fiction, and she went through as a reader a phase of mystery and thriller books. But I really tried to rein her in. I'm like, I think it's so nice you want to share these books, but you want to attract readers from your comps. So, from the sake of building your brand, hold off on sharing the thrillers and share historical fiction books
Right.
because you share readers with those authors. So, those are the authors that we want to collaborate with. Those are the authors that we
Right.
want to cross post and connect with because you share readers. So,
Mhm.
make it
Yeah.
easier for yourself. If you're sharing thrillers and you're a historical fiction writer, of course, you can still make a beautiful community out of that. But when you're in the process of trying to sell a book and get a book in readers' hands, it's not the straightest path forward.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you have, I guess, a brand service that you call Turning Pages Personal Brand and Book Marketing Journey for Authors.
hmm
So an author who's considering, soliciting support and the help like that, is there a particular point at which like that this is an ideal spot to consider a program like it's a program, right? The Turning Pages?
Yeah, so it's Turning Pages is my private consulting for authors where we work on, I like to call it the triangle of the author, book, and reader connection. I believe that nothing, again, sells a book better than a reader, and that relationships really truly make the world go round. And most of the time, platform is treated like a platform, so to speak. But I more so treat it like a web of relationships and opportunities with people and connections. So it is a program because there's a significant amount of time that goes into it, and it covers everything. We start exactly with what we talked about earlier with that sort of visualization exercise. We find the common themes. I read the book and I pull out themes from the book that fit into that conversation. And from there, we build from the ground up that relationship process,
Right.
including, what opportunities exist. And, oftentimes I'm asked if, the opportunities only exist online, but they don't. There are some authors who are pillars of their communities. So part of this process then is helping them achieve their visibility and their brand presence in real life. So it really is so tailored to each independent author. And again, there is no wrong time to get started. I think though, like just, I'm sure you can tell just from the three things I just said that we cover, if you're still in the process of writing, it might be a little hard to focus.
Yes.
So I would rather you have your manuscript either done and you're querying, or your book is done, or it's in the editing phase with your publisher. Just that way, your attention can be mine and I can make this something that's enjoyable for you versus like another task on your to-do list.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So you mentioned something that is intriguing. You mentioned when you're at the querying stage, so you're looking for an editor or an agent,
Mhm.
whatever. How important is branding? Like, oh, you're thinking about branding as the book is available and you have readers or
Mhm.
it's on pre-order or whatever. How important is an author brand for that process of the query and the pitch and all those things?
That's another beast in itself. It really is. I actually, I get a lot of debut author inquiries, which is when I decided to do research into that stage of the journey too, because, you hear my credentials and you're like, oh, she can get me into a publishing house. And I think sometimes they forget about that agent piece in the middle of it, but that's okay. So I've done my research, and I've been working with debut authors now for maybe fire and hunger in the debut sell my first manuscript phase. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of literary agents who have helped fill in some of these gaps. Again, I prioritize relationships, and they have all pretty much said the same thing that it is important to have a presence because it shows that There will be people ready to buy your book if the publishing industry takes a gamble on publishing it. Like any other industry, publishing is making a bet. This
Yeah.
is a business. People seem to want to believe it's, this romantic early 2000s rom-com industry. And in a way it is, but it's still a business and they still have financial decisions to make and financial gains to achieve. So it's easier to take a risk on someone who's taking a risk, visibly taking a risk on themselves, is what it sort of comes down to. It's okay if you're in the process of building it. They are comfortable with seeing that you're putting the work in, but it's a lot harder to be a no name with no credentials,
Right.
unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So you have a few ways that people can learn more, glean some
Mhm.
insights, and one of them is open book, where
Yes.
storytelling meets strategy. Tell me a little bit about that and how people could access it.
Of course. So Open Book is my Substack. It will always be free. I have made this very clear from the start.
Because it's
This
open.
is It's open. It is an open book. I am not trying to, I love talking. I love community. I love connection. I'm not going to put everything behind a paywall and keep my thoughts to myself. But it's gone through different, it's a newsletter. It's got different cadences. It's all different things. It's on Substack. And, as we talked about earlier, early adoption, everything else, we are starting to expand open book to be used in different ways. So if you do go to subscribe, you will see a paid option, but I promise that is not to read the Substack. That is, again, very free. The paid options are for a membership community, so authors can do all of the things we've talked about together with weekly either co-working sessions hosted by me, monthly workshops, culture conversations, which are a big one for me, which is once a month we sit down all together on Zoom, of course, and we talk about what's going on in the world. We talk about culture. We talk about things that people are talking about and how we can relate them to each person's actual brand. Because what you say about water is going to be very different than what I say about water,
Right.
but we could both still be joining in on these bigger conversations. So, helping authors join that bigger conversation, expand their visibility, doing it all together, that is what you'll see for the paid tier of Open Book. And we've also recently included an author interview series where we talk to authors who do have platform about how platform has shaped or helped shape their writing career.
Cool, thank you. So I love that it's open and people can access it, and then those who want to engage and interact and that different kind of learning experience, that's a whole different tier that they can
Exactly.
opt into if they're interested in it. You said platform, and now I'm just as I'm thinking about the semantics and stuff. So
I
platform,
know.
brand, how do they interchange and
Oh my
overlap?
gosh, it's so crazy. I know. I go through and then I'm like, do I have to go and update all of my content to make sure all the language exists? It's crazy. So I look at it as, your brand is who you are, your platform is where it exists, and your marketing is how you sell.
Ah, beautiful. It's the Holy Trinity.
There you go. It's a nice little funnel.
I love that. But you also have because that's not enough. You also have a podcast that's loving books, isn't it?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. So I have third class, which is reading between the lines with a very dear friend and writer herself, Brienne. She and I are co-hosts of a book club podcast. It's called Third Class because you, the reader, are the third class.
Oh, I love that.
And
That is so cool.
so fun. And together we read books and then she goes to the wine store and pairs
Oh,
she'll tell the person in the wine store she's a local wine store that she loves and they're really into this idea.
like
So
an independent bookstore, right? Where they're really
exactly.
passionate about wine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she'll go in after we read the book and talk to them about the themes and everything that the book was about, and they'll help her find a wine that sort of fits the book's themes.
Oh my
And
God.
so when we're on air, we give our ratings of the books. She goes through what the wine is about, and then we drink it while we discuss the
Oh my
book
God.
itself.
There's so many friends that I have to, well, I mean, listeners of the podcast, of course, but there's going to be friends I'm going to reach out to and say, "Oh my God, you've got to check this out.
It's so much
This is
fun. Yes.
your cup of wine." Uh,
There you go. And
so yeah, are you
some
guys
books,
together, or is it that she sends you what the wine is and then you have to acquire it and you're doing it via Zoom, or are you sitting together to do this?
it doesn't matter. It's both. We live
Yeah.
local to one another, so if we
Okay.
can make it happen in person, we do. But
Yeah.
if not, I'll get pictures and I'll go to my wine store who's equally obsessed with the idea and he'll
Okay.
pull the bottle for me.
That's great.
But it's funny. Some books will be like, that was a three. It wasn't that great, blah, blah, blah. But by the time the bottle is done and the episode's over, it's a five. It is a
It's a
strong
fine.
five. And we're so excited to be talking about
Oh my
it.
God,
So
that's
it's a
the
really
trick. We
fun.
need we
Yeah.
need we need to ply our readers with wine. No, I'm
There
kidding.
you go. We've uncovered the secret in this
That's
30-minute
right.
episode.
That's why books and beer tours do so well. Probably.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what
So
it
it's
is.
really
All right.
fun.
Everything gets just a little bit what is it? Beer
Happier. Yeah.
glasses. Beer goggles.
Yes.
Okay. Wow, that's what I need to do. I need to hand out beer goggles when I'm at
That's
events.
a fantastic idea. See, those are fun ways to engage with readers. And, I feel like so often, just to end on a different type of a note, but, you know, readers read for enjoyment. They read for it's their end of day or early day wind down. It's on the beach, it's on a plane. They're not reading out of urgency. They're not reading out of chaos energy. They're reading to calm down. And typically they do pour something to do it, which is, where
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
ideas came from. But readers, the reading journey is a wellness journey in a way. People read because they have the luxury of time to read, or they carve out the luxury of time to read. And I think that's something really important authors need to remember when they go to market themselves. It's, you don't need to feel urgency to market because your readers don't feel urgency to read. It should all come from that same place of, a book is unfortunately not a need, it is a want. So how do we make them want your book next?
Oh, that is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So much amazing advice. So you had mentioned something earlier that I wanted to go back to, and it is I mean, you've helped people get into the digital realm and stuff like that, but we're
Mhm.
now in an overtly digital space. There's a lot of auto-generated
I
digital
know.
content being created. I haven't used those two letters. That can sometimes cause violent arguments between people and tension and one-star review bombing and all those
Mhm.
things. But how in this digital world, how does the human connection, what are some, I guess, strategies or ways to leverage that more human connection that you had mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough world out there. I have an author who actually was on my author interview series who has a beautiful book cover and worked with an illustrator and even did like as it was going through its iterations on his Instagram channel, he was asking his audience to weigh in on which direction to continue going. Like this was a genuine illustrated book cover, but it's so good that people are like newer people to his book are accusing it of being digitally created.
Yes.
And so it's one of those things that is just very frustrating and it's going to be a continuous conversation. I see now too, it's like if you use M dashes or if you use the Oxford comma or if you use this, I'm
If
like,
your
what?
writing
Like people,
is solid and
yeah,
doesn't have typos.
which is so frustrating because it's a craft. And the reason that the softwares are picking up on those writing techniques is because they're commonly used writing styles. And we can't write that off in general. I think we have to just, this is where that human connection, like you just said, and that relationship with your readers really comes into play.
Right.
It might be harder for a debut where the readers and the community don't really have a foundation to base your writing off of. But draw a point of view, have an opinion about what your standard is and be comfortable talking about it. And
Yeah.
that kind of honesty and transparency can often do wonders.
That thank you. I appreciate that. And I love how neither one of us have used those letters. But we know what we're talking about.
Of
Um,
course.
when it comes to that authenticity, right, of just being open and to having a frank discussion or an authentic discussion about that, there's some schools of author marketing or author branding that say, well, if you state that where you stand, you're going to lose half your readership. Is that a concern? Like an author, being that forthright or that honest about where they stand on whatever position and in whatever. I mean, the whole world is divisive in so many
Oh
different
my
ways.
gosh, I know. And that's it. It's yeah, I know. I think this 100% goes back to that common ground conversation that we had all the way in the beginning of this talk with that visualization exercise. What did you and your reader talk about that you found common ground over?
Right.
And that has to be part of your North Star and that has to be part of your conversation. And I have my political views, but it's not something I talk about with my writers. It's not part of my recap from when I have a coffee with a writer or a conversation like this. Politics doesn't come up for me. So therefore, I can have those conversations in public, in my home, in my relationships with my friends and family, but I'm not bringing them to my platform. So maybe there's one or two people who wish I would, but that's just not part of what my bigger picture conversation
Right.
is. So that goes for anything. That can even go for, the World Cup is going on right now. Sports aren't the biggest part of my platform either. I'm not really weighing in there either. So I think it really does come down to having that common ground with who you're trying to build relationships with and respecting, what that conversation can look like. Even if it's a healthy opposition to what they would believe, have the conversation in a way that feels like a conversation, not as an attack, not as
Right.
a soapbox, but, I understand you may feel differently, but this is where I stand and this is my point of view. And if you're always keeping that reader in mind, if you're keeping that relationship in mind, it doesn't matter to me if you lose the people who are not part of that relationship because, okay, they may have been more eyes on your pages, but if you're trying to build a healthy for yourself place for you to show up, you don't need the haters. So,
Right, right. And also there's something about like recognizing your brand and your books are not everyone's cup of tea. They're not,
right.
you're trying to please everyone is
You
probably going to
can't.
please nobody, right?
Yes, exactly. So, and that's just human nature too. And,
Yeah.
we say about our dog all the time, like we don't like everybody. Why do we have to expect her to like everybody? So, not
That's true.
everybody needs to like you. Not everybody needs to like your book, but you also don't have to provoke or poke the bear.
Yes. Which is why when we're walking our dog and we see his nemesis coming down the street, we
We
cross the
cross.
street because
Exactly.
we just know that this isn't going to happen. They're not going to be
Right.
friends.
And
So,
it goes back, exactly. And it goes back to the comps, right? Like comp your work to authors who you feel more aligned with. And
right,
your everything you do then sort of like layers into your storytelling instead of stands independently. It's like
right,
if I'm comping to you, maybe we're the same genre. Maybe our main character is going through the same thing. Maybe you and I live in the same geographic area. Maybe we have the same view on a certain current event or something. And then you're layering conversations without always having to say, this is what I think, or this is
right.
my perspective. You're storytelling through your community.
Awesome. So, as we get close to the end, is there anything like in terms of when you think about author brand that a consistent mistake that authors frequently make that you just, you've probably said, it feels like I've said this a million times, but I really wish authors would understand
Yes, I'm
this.
such a broken record. I say the same things over and over, but you know
But
what?
it's
In
important. You need
marketing,
to. You need to.
yes, in marketing, it takes somebody 12 times at this point in
12. I
time.
thought it was, oh, it's inflation now. It's
It's
12. Oh,
inflation.
yeah.
Yes, it's because of inflation. It takes somebody 12 times. Sometimes I tell authors 15 if they're people who need a little extra push,
Yes.
but 12 is the number
Wow.
that to see something, to trust something, to take it as fact. And, think about the amount of times you see something, the amount of things you see. We have I love to say too, I'm like, I don't think we're meant to have this much access to information. Like this is really uncomfortable that I could just look anything. I don't love that.
Yeah.
But think about it. But when you Google any simple question, you get 36 different answers. So you have to see the same answer a lot of times in the search results before you're like, that must be the right one, you know?
Right.
So that takes a long time. So the two things, so that's why I'm a broken record. But yes, the two things that I have issue with that authors do when it comes to marketing, one, it's only showing up when you have something to promote, because if you only show up when you have something to promote, you are the friend who calls when you need something. And we all know that that's annoying. No one cares. No one wants to help the friend who only calls when they need something.
Right.
We show up regularly. We make random visits. We say, I'm thinking about you. We say, I was just on summer vacation and I had a great time. You're allowed to still be a human being. You're not just your title. Um, and then when you're showing up regularly, you're allowed to ask a favor. And that favor is buy my book or subscribe to my newsletter. And it makes that conversion a lot easier. And the second thing is prioritizing likes and follows on Instagram, going viral. If one more person comes to me and says, I want to go viral, it's actually slowed down. People aren't saying it as much anymore, thank God. But either my messaging is getting stronger or the tide is changing. I'm not sure which, but going viral means a lot of people have seen your work. But at the same time, it does not mean a lot of people are remembering what they have seen. If you think about scrolling on Instagram as a user, not as a business, but as a user, if you can actually tell me the last five things you liked, I will give you $100 because I can't tell you the last five things I liked. And I was on Instagram right before I joined this call. We scroll and like blindly,
That is true.
So putting weight on like count does more for reach on Instagram. So it does help it helps Instagram think that the content is important enough to show it to more people,
Right.
but it's not giving you followers, it's not giving you readers, it's not turning into something valuable for you. I would prioritize the numbers of conversations you're having, the amount of people who, I people do not engage anymore the way that they used to on social. And sometimes it feels like you're shouting into a void. But then the other day I was at a book signing and an author came up to me and she was like, I love what you share. I find it so helpful. And I went back. She has not engaged in a single thing that I've posted ever. She follows me, but has never engaged in a single thing that I have shared.
Yeah.
But she is finding it valuable. So there is no real metric that will give you that data. So stick true to your brand, weather the storm. Do not be the friend that only calls when you need something, and it will all start to compound.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Jessica, can you please let my listeners know where they can find you online?
Yes, so I do everything under my name. So Jessica Sorrentino is my website, it's my Instagram, it's even my Substack, even though the publication is called Open Book. And my email is hello at Jessica Sorrentino. So everything is literally connected right to my name.
Awesome. Jessica, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
I have a handful of reflections. One of the things Jessica talked about when she talked about author branding, and this is really kind of important because I have been putting together a book on author branding. Again, like a book in hand, it's a few years because I keep adding stuff to it. But this is something I've mentioned in talks I've given, is that this made me think of you and how powerful that is. I know I get, and it's happened even earlier today on Facebook, 2 different people tagged me in the last 24 hours because they saw a skeleton in the back of a truck or on display somewhere. They tagged me on Facebook and said, this made me think of you. Now, that's obviously evidence of the branding that I've done with my skulls and skeleton, but I also get similar ones when it comes to stupid dad jokes or craft beer or stuff like that. And I think that's one of the highest compliments a person can pay you, is this made me think of you. And when that happens, you know you've made the right impact in terms of your author brand. And if you haven't, if somebody sees something that makes them think of you, that is, as Jessica said, is kind of part of what your brand is, or how people see you, which it made me go, as Jessica was talking, I actually stopped the interview when I was doing the editing, and I went back because I believe it or not, comic books helped me learn a lot about the world. And there was an Archie, Archie Andrews from the Archie comics. There was a cartoon where I think it's Archie, or was it Jughead? One of them read, and they did it in the Old English of Robert Burns. It was a poem he wrote. And in it was, and I'm going to do the modern English translation. Oh, would some power the gift give us, to see ourselves as others see us. It would, from many a blunder, free us. Now again, I did that in modern English, but in the Archie comic, it was Archie, I believe, or whatever the character was. Maybe it was Jughead. Who knows? But it stuck out because it was written partially in the Old English. Oh, would some power the gift give us, or whatever. Anyways, the way they said it, but I kind of get the message. And the whole thing is Archie was reflecting on was that ability to see ourselves the way others see us, which obviously goes back to Robbie Burns and all that stuff. But I mean, that stuck with me from a comic book for all those years, and it's such a valuable thing to consider. It's really kind of interesting when you can see the way people see you, and that's a great way to see what your brand is. Another thing that Jessica talked about is how buzz doesn't make up, isn't the thing that makes up sales, but passionate readers do. Yes, the buzz can get some people in, but that's not what makes the sales. It's the passion from the readers that do. Which kind of ties into another thing she said, is not treating it not as a platform, but as a relationship. It's not about platform and whatever. It's about the relationships. It's about the engagement and the conversations that you have versus followers and likes. And I think we forget that when we think about branding and we think about marketing. We forget that it all comes back down to relationships. And that leads to the final reflection based on something she shared, is not just showing up when you have something to promote. We all have those friends, and I'm using air quotes when I say friends, or people we know who only ever show up when they need or want something from you. They never just show up just to say, hey, or whatever. There's always some motive. And I when that happens, I get this feeling, like not a spidey sense feeling, but you kind of get that, they're here just because of whatever. And that's not a place where you want people to see you as a writer. You don't want them to see as, there's Mark again showing up to promote his book. You want Mark just kind of showing up on a regular basis and being part of whatever it is. And every once in a while, Mark's going to have a new book he's going to talk about, or he's going to have something he wants to let you know about that he's pretty excited about. But you're not annoyed because Mark doesn't only show up when he's there to promote himself. Mark shows up to be part of that community, part of that relationship, part of the passion of sharing and engaging in community and connections. So how about you? What was it from the conversations? What did you reflect on? What were the things that you were thinking about and learning when you were listening to Jessica? Please let me know in the show notes at starkreflections.ca or wherever you do catch this podcast. Also, feel free to go check out. I will have links to, it's jessicasorrento.substack.com, where you can check out Open Book, which is available and open to all to read. Now, there is an additional payment element for that engagement and that community and that interactivity, but you still have access to all her great resources over there, and it's worth checking out. So I will include a link to that in the show notes. But that is it for this episode, he said. This is weird. My mouth just not working properly. But anyways, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. A huge shout out and thank you to my awesome listeners as well as my patrons. And I did have somebody join the patron community this week. My apologies. I will grab your name for the next episode so I can put it in my notes, that I kind of my bullet points that I look at as I'm doing the show notes. So welcome. I'll be sending you a message as well to welcome you aboard. I realized I haven't done that. It just happened in the last couple of days. But thank you for those who support this podcast over at patreon.com/darkreflection. As well, reflections, as well as my coffee buddies over at buymeacoffee.com/Mark Leslie, and of course those who support my Substack, the Stark Reflections Substack as well. So thank you guys for that, and thank you for listening. You can also support this podcast just by sharing this episode or any episode that you've enjoyed with somebody else. That is part of connection and community and relationship and passion, all those wonderful things Jessica talked about in this episode. But like I said, that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Until next week, and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.